Good morning. This is Talking Devils, the leading independent Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Barton, joined by Manchester United legend Paul Parker and United support Dave Murphy to talk over a mixed week for United. Some good, some bad. How are you doing, Paul? You all right?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you very much.
And David, how are you doing?
Yeah, doing well. It's been a good weekend. So yeah, we don't get to say that too often this summer or this season so far. So yeah,
Yeah. If you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook, feel free to comment and get your questions in. We do reply as well if you comment on the replay. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, please subscribe, please share where you can. Really appreciate that. If you are listening back later on the audio podcast, please give us a subscription on that platform and leave a review if you can on the platform you listen on. Really appreciate that. The reviews really help us out, so would really appreciate if you do that. Just before we came on air, the lads were absolutely destroying me because I had a really good week last week. It started with the airing of True Genius, which I didn't know was on. I got a message from Paul, like telling me, like, well done and everything. And I was like, mate, well, first of all, I didn't know what I'd done to deserve such a nice message. Well done for what? Living. Um, Turns out the film was on, and I was like, oh, that's nice, which was good because obviously it was before United played, and BT, well, obviously BT moved into TNT now, and they usually do that with when United play European games. So it just caught me off guard. But it was a nice little build up because it's obviously 60 years since George Best made his debut. And on Thursday, we went to the Association of Former United Players dinner, which was in George's honour. I was a massive honour and privilege because I was on the 68 winners table. Brian Kidd was there, Alex Stepney was there, Paddy Crerand, obviously, and we were with Callum on the table. Really funny story before, just as we're approaching into the ground, a car pulls up and someone's lost. They don't know how to get in. My wife goes over and talks to them. It turns out to be Mike Summerby, Manchester City legend. She doesn't have any idea who it is. She jumps in the car with him, and so like they've just disappeared somewhere. She's obviously directing him into the other car park to be able to park for the event, and just comes trotting over this bridge with Mike Summerby. He's like, I had to tell her later who it was, but he was sat on our table as well. And like, to be fair, he was dead nice, and he was obviously George Best's best friend for a long time. I think George was his best man at the wedding, and in the 60s or 70s. So obviously it was emotional for him to be there as well. Really nice turnout. Everyone celebrating George. Some nice speeches in there as well. And nice tribute to the greatest player that ever lived. And the lads have spent plenty of time mocking me for the number of pictures that I was quite happy to post on my Instagram. But I don't usually wear a suit, guys. So I was nicely dappered up, and my head was shiny. I was taking advantage of it. Anyway, talk about European football. Bayern Munich 4, Manchester United 3. It was a strange game, Paul, because for a long time, United started quite well. Bayern take the lead through, a horrendous error from Onana. United, I felt like there was a big gap there in quality, but United were always close enough that they were never out of the game, and then there was the farcical end, which sees it end 4-3. United were missing players. I still feel like if they were at the full complement, they're a little bit way off what Bayern Munich are. But like we were talking about last week, it was a bit of a weird sort of step into European elite football for United because the Premier League's so dominant now and European football's so damaged. It was kind of weird to see where United stood in that. And the answer is not miles away from one of the best teams from another country, but still not good enough to win or to get a result on the day. What did you make of what you saw in Germany?
Well, I mean, I think we have to look at it and say that everyone talks about Bayern Munich being one of the sides that you think can maybe win the tournament. That's how everyone's been seeing it. I think they're up there in the top three of maybe winning it, but I think we all know who the one is, and it's not an enjoyable competition as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, the competition for me now is Europa League. That's where you're getting a little bit more competition in that. But I think you have to look at United, and I always believed, I look at German football now, and German football for me is definitely taken a big step backwards. Big step. When you look at it defensively, there isn't that strength there defensively. When you look at the way that the players that they're producing midfield-wise, creativity-wise, they haven't got a lot. And it seems like Harry Kane's going to score at least one goal every single game. And it's going out there. But I look at United against them. I didn't fancy them. I still think that Bayern was slightly better. But like you said, Wayne, United were missing players. We really don't know at this moment in time, would those players have made a difference? Because we don't know with the mixed bag that's going on at this moment in time with players, some players up, some players down. But the goal, the first goal that, the goal that they conceded hurt, to be perfectly honest, because United were playing reasonably well. I never expected them to play that well when they went out there. And if they'd have gone in front, you would have thought, oh, this is going to make a big difference. And it went against, when it went against them, and the manner in which it went against them, kind of, you saw it just kind of changed a little bit from that little bit of authority and belief. They lost their way in certain ways. And then when, Bayern had two very good wide players who made such a difference, who United was struggling to deal with in fullback areas.
Yeah. Yeah, Paul, good summary there. United were closer than what I expected. I know that you guys were both fairly confident of a result based on the fact that the things that we saw, really, Bayern weren't as good defensively, like Paul just said. Dave, obviously then you've got the way that the game ended, and doesn't appear to, 4-3 doesn't appear to be a true reflection, or maybe it does because of the kamikaze way that the teams were defending and how nonsensical it became. Not like the Bayern and United games of the past, which was stoic and hard to sort of read, and those off errors resulted in the game and destinies being turned, really. And you didn't get that. You had a lot of sort of free flowing football and both teams making a lot of mistakes. Where do you? I know it's difficult to judge where United are in the sort of bigger picture of European football, but what did you make of the game in itself?
I think we started off very well. I really did. Which kind of surprised me because we didn't know what we were going to get coming out of the gate, especially Bayern being such a big and dominant club, and with Harry Kane in the team, they're going to score goals. But I think that the first goal, and in the manner that we conceded it, had a massive effect on our confidence. There's conceding goals, and then there's conceding goals that actually concern you. And that first goal, I think, rattled us. If that had been a 30-yard screamer or a goal from a corner, that's one thing. But in the manner that we conceded with Onana basically throwing the ball into the net, I think it took we took a big body blow to our confidence and how well we were playing, and that's been a bit of a problem for United over the past year or so. Is once we concede, we seem to just, unless we get back pretty quickly, we seem to just collapse. But in the manner that we conceded that goal, I think had a bigger effect on us than just a regular goal, if that makes sense, because we seem to get rattled then. I don't think, if you just turned on the TV at full time and seen 4-3, you would have thought, oh my God, I missed a classic. I don't think anyone missed a classic. I think it was late. There was so many errors throughout the game that Bayern were not really that far off. We weren't that really far off, Bayern. And I know some people were criticizing us at 3-1 down, and even at 3-1, I didn't think that this scoreline reflected the game. I don't think Bayern were, as good as a 3-1 scoreline at that time. And then obviously we, Casemiro scored and they scored and we scored. I think 4-3 was probably, the right reflection for a game, a 1-goal difference. But Bayern were by no means far superior to United. I do believe that we have a problem with confidence, and we have a problem when we go a goal down. And in a manner, again, as I said, that we conceded that goal, I think that we took a bigger blow to our confidence, and it knocked us right out of our stride, because the defence looked very jittery after that for about 10 minutes or so. They were terrified to do anything with the ball. So, but on reflection of it after the game, we weren't that far off, and I think we'll give Bayern an even better game when they come to Old Trafford.
Yeah, I do. It's a good point you make about the confidence, and I do wonder if in a roundabout sort of way that they'll look at that game if they watch it back. Well, I'm sure that they have the coaching staff, but if the players properly watch it back, that there's nothing to be fearful about, really. I thought for periods of watching that game, there was a big quality gap, but I think on reflection, it was probably more to do with the dropped confidence of the United players and just thinking, oh God, here we go again. Instead of just sort of standing up and like, well, we started well, why can't we get back into it? And then, you end up thinking, if only they had shown that kind of snarl 20 minutes earlier in the game, that self-belief, because they were there to be got at, even with a 2-goal gap. And I think that's the point what I'm thinking about with European football as a whole. All right, there's an obvious, like Paul said, there's an obvious one at the top of the tree, and everyone's fighting it out. So like, beat that rope, and until that quality gap is fairly addressed, that's the way that it's going to be. So it's kind of like, United, it's still within their power. And I look at that when I look across the Premier League as a whole. When United come against Arsenal, and you think, well, United have got an injury crisis and they're not a mile away from this quality, really. It looks bad on a week-to-week basis, because what you're watching on a week-to-week basis is you're watching United with all their confidence issues and all their injury problems. And all the discipline issues that are around the club. So you're seeing all this happening. You're thinking, oh God, crisis to crisis. But when you see them one-on-one, yeah, all right, different matter with the Liverpool game last season. But on a one-on-one basis, like with Arsenal, who were the second best team in the country, you think, well, we're not that far away from there, and there's no excuse once all the ducks are in order that United on that level. There's no excuse really, because they've got the money, they've got, even with the ownership, they've still got everything in order to be able to compete with them. Anyway, move on to Burnley. Johnny says, good morning, Johnny, hope you're doing well, mate. He says, nice to hear you're all doing well. Pleased with the Burnley result. Great goal from Bruno. Still not happy with a number of players not tracking back and helping defend, Rashford, etc. Well, we'll get on to Burnley now. And nice for me, before we even start on, and I guess one or two players will get criticism, but start with praise. Onana, nice for him to get a clean sheet and make a couple of good saves in there after the Bayern game. I don't think there's a problem with him in terms of his self-confidence. He tweeted after the game about having, and he obviously came. No, he didn't tweet. He came out in the interview, didn't he, and sort of held his hands up and took full responsibility, which I think is nice of a United player to be taking responsibility. But I think it's a bit hard when it's the goalkeeper, because the goalkeeper's the net result of poor defending and everything like that. It's always harsher on a goalkeeper. Even a defender who's the last line, if they make one mistake, then it could be fatal. But he did hold his hands up. He did say that it was his responsibility, and he, to his credit, he played with confidence against Burnley. And it was a tough game. We were missing all the entire first choice defence. Johnny Evans is called into play his 200th game for United, and it's Evans playing as Franz Beckenbauer who provides the difference. He hits this long ball, which is magnificently volleyed by Fernandes. A lot of people are comparing it to the Rooney and Van Persie goal from 2013. What I will say is there was a goal earlier in that season where Giggs, in the FA Cup, Giggs had played the pass to Van Persie, and Van Persie had hit it on the West Ham, and that's what that one reminded me of more than that. Fantastic goal. United survived a couple of more injury bugs towards the end of the game. Reguilon having to come off, and he played fairly well again, having to come off. First of all, moving, and then another one of the defenders came off, didn't they? Was it Lindelof who had to come off? So there was two defenders who had to come off and reposition. Amrabat ends up at left back for his debut, gives a free kick away right there. And I'm thinking, this is just United's luck. The guy who comes on to play left back, who's a holding midfielder, gives a free kick away, and then we end up giving a goal away. But we didn't, and all right, Burnley, it's a, culture shift for Burnley. They're having to change their entire identity of a club, which is easier to do. Well, not easier to do out of the Championship and catch everyone by surprise and come up in the way that they did. But it's proven very difficult for them to maintain that level in the Premier League. Probably that's what helped United. That they had something like 70%, probably even more than 70% possession against United.
72, yeah.
72, and that's That's damning for United, but United did have a lot of mitigating circumstances, the players that they were missing, and they get a good win. Paul, obviously, a fantastic goal. I don't know if you can say United were fully deserving of 3 points, or that it's like the sign of a ship turning and that things are going to get massively better. But in that kind of situation, a win's a win, and the vultures are circling, waiting for United to lose their 4th game in a row. So good character from an under fire squad to pull out a result like that.
Did you say a ship?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. I thought you said something else. You could have said something else there, given how things have been, really. I think the fact that you just go back to one of the bits you just said about 20 seconds ago about that free kick that Amrabat gave away. I mean, it was a worry. And I turned around and said, I wondered what he was doing. I mean, that was poor defending on his part. I call that lazy defending. He's gone in with his wrong leg as well. And he's only just come on to put him in someone in that position. You're under fire, who's good at what he does, but he's not an out and out defender. Just seemed really strange that he's, to put him there on his wrong side as well, But I was waiting for that free kick. The goalkeeper comes up and they take a short one. And that summed up Burnley. Burnley reminded me of the first season of when Pep took over. They thought they were suddenly going to become Barcelona within one day. And they just overplayed. And that was a new back four. And they never really tested them with balls in the box. They had a goalkeeper who was ridiculed for a mistake he made in the previous game. One who's been questioned on going for crosses when he gave a penalty away that should have been a penalty against Wolves. Yeah. And they didn't put enough balls in there. And great. I mean, if when you're having a bad time, you need help. Burnley gave help. They passed and passed for the sake of passing, and they looked absolutely fantastic. You can imagine. Everything about him was perfect. But if you're a Burnley fan and Burnley quite well. I could imagine some of those fans walking away and what they were saying. When one fan comes up and says, "Oh, didn't we play lovely football?" I'm sure he had a few choice words to say about the reason why he doesn't like choice football when they get beat 1-0 in a game when, in theory, they should have got something from. Yeah. So that was a bonus in that sense, that they come up against a team who want to play flippy flappy. But then when you looked at it and you thought, right, you just said Burnley had 72%. And you think to yourself, it doesn't matter who you're missing. Whoever goes in there has to still work hard. And I hate going to it, Wayne. And I've been on it the last few weeks, and it absolutely is. And now fans are starting to talk about it, where fans never really talked about it. They took a win as a win. If they got beat, there was other things. But I think maybe because fans and expect that should never have to talk about anybody working hard, because there's an unwritten rule in football, in any sport, in life, that you work hard. Yeah. And there's a lot of them not doing it. How many times did you see Hannibal run past players to get back? Yeah. I counted 10 times in the first half. He ran back, not with him losing the ball, running back because someone else had lost the ball or made a bad pass, but he ran back. That was automatic. Yeah. That's automatic. That's someone who loves the game, who doesn't want to get beat, who sees a problem, and he's up and back. He's not a holding player who sits there and dollies around. He's a midfield player, and middle of the field, he wants to take part in every area, and he's up and he's back. No different to Fernandes. He's up and he's back. And Casemiro is Casemiro the way he plays, and you're never going to question Casemiro in that sense, because he's doing his bit. But if United were being United, he would be pinnacle in everything that happened with United defensively and going forward in the play being set. And you still saw flashes that those early passes early balls he kept putting in behind, trying to turn Burnley round because they were squeezing up. But there is, and I think there is players who are not doing what's written on the can. And it's becoming blatantly obvious to people, because now all different people now are talking about the work rate of this Manchester United team. And we saw it a lot in the first half, the way they started. Hannibal, Højlund and Fernandes were trying to squeeze up to really close them down. I'm not using that other word because that's just a new fancy word they've added to something that the game's been doing from day one. Everyone thinks it's a new thing now, but it's not. People have done it to survive. But they're all doing it. One player in particular never done it. Now, people talk about heat maps. I think we need a run map. It's just, there's honestly more movement in a dormant turtle. It's absolutely, it's terrible. It's embarrassing, Wayne, that I'm talking about somebody who's playing for the biggest club in the world, got maybe the biggest contract at the club, but doesn't want to run for his teammates. It should be for himself, and it should be for his teammates. And it should be a thank you to the club and to the fan. One, to the fans, local boy doing well. To the club, thank you for giving me something. Thank you for giving me a great contract. And nothing's been given back yet. And it's poor. It's poor. And the manager should see that, because I can see it. Everyone else can see it. And I think now it might be a little sit on the side, because there's no return at the moment in time. A sit on the side and get a little bit of life out there. Someone who wants to work hard, someone who wants to play every game and prove it, needs to be done. Hannibal done it, and he's just come in. I mean, but I watched him in the Championship, and I saw him quite a few times. I've done a few Championship games last season, and I saw Birmingham. I saw Birmingham last season at Queen's Park Rangers, back end of the season, and his work ethic is incredible. And every time you read around the champion, because I do read stuff about the lower leagues, about the EFL and the National League, and every club, when they talked about Birmingham City, everybody talked about Hannibal.
Yeah.
So he done himself justice in a division below, because as you know, Wayne and Dave, if he'd have gone to Birmingham and been on Manchester United, everyone would have hit him. Yeah. Everyone would have hit him straight away. Couldn't wait to get to him. But he had to earn respect, and he definitely had respect in that division. And you can see why he got that. And if you can go and earn respect in the Championship, you come into that division, you're gonna go and you're gonna prove a point. And he's proven a point at this moment in time.
Yeah, just before I move on to Dave, what did you make of that? I mean, you talked about the work rate, and I think that's something that's definitely been levelled as a squad in general over the last few games, certainly against Brighton. That's what I think. Even though like there were concerns, like you're going to put Johnny Evans and Hannibal in, I felt that was probably a good thing, because they've been reared on that throughout the entire club, and so they're going to know that that's the base standard. And yeah, you would. I did actually tweet to the effect of that's a good thing for having McTominay in as well, even though McTominay didn't really play well. Theoretically, it's a good thing for Rashford because he's been through the same system, but particularly with Evans and Hannibal, because they were probably the star players for United. And Fernandes, can't really dispute what Fernandes did. And, I thought Casemiro had probably his best game this season as well. But Evans obviously playing the pass. You've said something nice there about Hannibal's work rate, but what about Evans to come in 200th game? Oh, he said it was one of the best nights of his life. And I think all of us, when he was re-signed, probably not expecting very much. Not expecting, to be brutally honest, that standard of performance from him. So credit where credit's due, right, Paul? I mean, you expect him to defend well, hopefully, but to pull out a pass like that as well to change the game was fantastic.
It was, and first of all, you had a lad playing on the left side of defence, right-footed, and he's used his left foot to pass an incredible ball. There's an England centre half who plays on the left side most of his career, who won't kick the ball with his left foot, who can't open up himself up to strike a ball like that. And that's the difference. That's the difference with Johnny Evans going there. Won all his headers clean, in both winning headers in the opponent's box as well. Got the ball, done well with it, moved the ball very, very quickly. And if you're going to go to Burnley, you want people who are willing to go for a fight. There's no better person maybe than Johnny Evans when you look for that. His background, everything he's from, everything about him. says that he's going to fight because he's proud to be a Manchester United player again. And that was the big difference. There's a lot of players who should look at that, and I'm sure there was players when he turned up who were looking at him going, well, what are you doing here? He showed them why he was there. And when you look at it, I'm glad that the manager, I saw Varane on the bench, and I'm glad that he didn't play Varane now against Burnley, because you needed a bit of resilience in that game. You know, you didn't need someone who you're worried that might break down after 2 minutes because the going's getting tough. And he got better and better. Hannibal was exactly the same. Scott McTominay ran around, but like you say, he knows about those games. He would have played against, been in those kind of games, even as a young boy. And after watching all those games at the Cliff and watching a few games when it was the A and B team, when they used to go and play games away, everybody at that level still wants to beat Manchester United. So there is fighting them. I'll be honest, I think Highland done quite well in that situation. Yeah. With the scraps that he got, he was still having a go. I will say that he still needs to understand not to go down too easy. He went down a few times, and he does. When you're that bigger, you look silly when you go down when you're trying to con a referee. He looks terrible. Yeah. He looks like reality TV acting. He looked terrible, but his general game was very good, and balls are going into him. He's trying to hold the ball up, and I haven't seen that since Sparky left. And we've got to remember, he's 20 years of age. We all know that when he does have a bit of not a good game, that the press are going to pick up on the fact of they're going to mention Haaland and they're going to mention his price. And they're not really getting it at this moment in time of his age. He's playing for the biggest club in the country, and it's difficult, and he's doing okay. And he will improve. The quicker the team improve, it's going to hasten he's actually him getting better and better as well.
Yeah, he's at least the good thing is that he's off the mark, scoring in the Champions League with the first goal the other night. Davo, considering the circumstances, is probably the best way to preface that, but to say that it was a good win at Burnley, a good one, because people are saying, like, look how the mighty have fallen celebrating a win like that, especially having like a quarter of the ball effectively. But I think anyone who understands the plight that United are in, it's not just injury crisis, it's a massive confidence crisis, and the knives are out from everyone. People are waiting for there was a guy who, we can criticise City and criticise Rashford. I think we do it fairly when he doesn't play well, and we praise him when he does play well. But there was a guy on Twitter who set up a notepad on his phone, and he was documenting every single mistake that he made. And I'm like, well, every single player makes mistakes. Nobody has a perfect game. But considering that kind of attention that's out for the players, you can understand why. You can see how much it's getting to them. Harry Maguire's mum coming out a few weeks ago and defending him. I know that, all right, your opinion on that side. Is the pressure's obviously getting to the circles of the families, and so it demands a certain level of performance. And United's players who went out there on Saturday night, 8 p.m. kickoff time at Burnley, stood up to be countered.
Yeah, listen, let's not forget one thing here. That even though Burnley had only picked up, I think, 1 point before that game, it was their game of the season. It really was, and no one knows that better than anyone than Paul about Manchester United coming into town. It's their biggest game of the season. Everyone raises their game against United. I say this, often enough. Manchester United winning the league is a bigger achievement than most other teams winning the league, because everyone plays that little bit harder, that runs that little bit, faster, and gives that little bit more when United come to town. So we shouldn't underestimate how big of a win that was against Burnley, because this could have kick-started their season some way, a mini revival for them. So beating Manchester United, and as we know, they had over 70% of the possession, they were there to win that game. So for me, I thought it was a fantastic win. Regardless of where Burnley are in the league, we have the tendency to go to these places now the past couple of years and basically implode. I thought a couple of players really stood out. Johnny Evans, to me, was just absolutely fantastic. And when I seen his name on the team sheet, to me, I instantly thought that that's the best thing that we could have done tonight, because if anyone's going to stick their foot, their head, or whatever into a challenge, it's going to be Johnny Evans. because he's been brought up that way with Manchester United. We've got too many players, and not just at United, but we've got too many players playing in the Premier League now that are just going through the motions. And they get away with it week in and week out because every now and then there's a flash of brilliance, and all of a sudden that guy is worth his 200 grand a week. I did think Marcus Rashford was poor. I think he's been very poor this season. I think his goals last season, covered up a lot of the lack of work that he was doing. And now the goals have dried up. I know we got one against Arsenal. The last couple of games, the goals have dried up. As Paul said, people are starting to point it out now. They're starting to see the obvious that Rashford just doesn't put in a stint. And it's mind-blowing how he stays on the pitch. It really is. I don't understand it. Maybe it's a good management from Ten Hag to try and play him through this bad period. And there's times when we say, a player will only improve if he plays. But that's the golden rule that I have with Garnacho. A player only improves when he plays. I know myself and Paul, we had this conversation a few weeks back. And Paul rightly pointed out that any games that Garnacho has started, he hasn't really had an impact. But I think, if he starts more games, he starts to have more of an impact. It was kind of baffling that Rashford stayed on again. It really was. But I mean, when you have someone like, McTominay as well running around, and he didn't do a lot, but he did a lot of running. And we needed that. We needed players doing a lot of running against Burnley. But I really like Højlund. I really do. He just offers us something different up there. He wants the ball. He works for it. He's trying things. He's trying to get into positions. He got into a few positions. I mean, that cross that came in, I think, from Fernandes that just whipped the cross, that he was that 1 second too late. Those are the things we haven't seen of a Manchester United forward in a while, getting into those positions. And he got the monkey off his back, as they say, last week against Bayern in that goal. I think that'll take a lot of pressure off him. He's been unfortunate with the other one that got disallowed. And the Johnny Evans, the only thing that could have topped it off the other night was Johnny Evans' goal being allowed. Was it offside? I mean, if you're going by the letter of the law, it was offside. But then we look at the City game a few weeks back, and that was given as a goal, and the guy was like at least a yard offside. But all in all, I think although we didn't have much of the ball, I think it was a very, very good win. And we've got Palace, we got Brentford at home, the next 2 home games. We got Sheffield United away. There's no reason why we can't go on a mini run. City being our biggest game now, coming up at the end of October. That's no disrespect to Palace or Brentford, because they're going to come to Old Trafford wanting to win those games. But I think the next 3 league games are winnable. And I think you're right about, the kudos I'll give to Onana was that he could have collapsed after the Bayern game, but he didn't. And he pulled off a few very, very good saves. And as Johnny had said there, maybe he is the type of character we need. I love Fabian Barthez, but there was times where I thought, how does this guy even think he's a goalkeeper? And then the next week he goes out and he pulls up a worldie, and you're thinking, okay, I forgive him again. I like him to that, but it's a little bit, heart stopping every time now. He's a very different goalkeeper from his shot stopping. He likes to. For me, he likes to do the flash, dive up into the air and palm it away. But a lot of goalkeepers that play in Italy seem to learn that over there as well. That flash is better. But all in all, when the lineup came out, my first instinct was our bench is better than our lineup, because we had, on paper it was. But after the game, I mean, and this is another thing that baffles me. I'm not taking that away from Bruno Fernandes, but there was no way Bruno Fernandes was man of the match today night. It was Johnny Evans all day long. It really was.
Fernandes did give Evans the award, didn't he? So
yeah, but the award, that's like going to your club presentation, not winning a trophy, and your parents buying you a medal on the way home. I mean, come on. Johnny Evans was definitely man of the match. He had an absolutely fantastic game, and maybe he'll remain in the team. It's a tricky one at Palace tomorrow night. Maybe he'll remain in the team for that. He's obviously not going to be our first choice, but he's not a bad backup. And when we signed Evans, even though when he left Manchester United all those years ago, I was, I thought it was the right thing. He just wasn't pulling up any trees. Then he went off and he actually took it up a level. And he went on to win the league with Leicester. And I equate that to Harry Maguire. I think Harry Maguire is a very good defender. I just don't think he's a very good defender at Manchester United. And I think Harry Maguire leaving Manchester United would take him up another level again. And in 5 years' time, we'll buy him back for 200 million. So, but no, I thought it was a great win the other night, because like I said, Manchester United coming to town is always the biggest show, and these teams raise their games. So.
Yeah, Dave, he just mentioned about VAR there. Let's have our weekly VAR debate, Paul. One of the things Dave is fond of saying is these things level themselves out over a season. So we got the Onana one, and ever since then, ever since the last minute of the Wolves game, it's just been a crescendo of like a cavalcade of terrible VAR awards with everything's gone against us. There was the penalty the other night against Eriksen, which was punished for not handball, for having arms, for the fact that he's got arms on the side of his body. We gave a penalty away, which has been the case. It's just been United's luck. It's been terrible. I think I said somewhere else. The saying is, if you can't be good, be lucky. Well, United have been bad and unlucky. I mean, they couldn't catch a break for anything for all of the games apart from the Wolves game. There's been a major call in there that's just been ridiculous. I mean, the closest thing that's been a fair one has been the one against Brighton with the ball going out of play, but all the other ones have been desperately harsh, and not so much that I'm bothered that the harshness of Evans' goal, because I think maybe the letter of the law is the player's offside, but it's not to do with whether it's right or wrong. It's to do with the ridiculous inconsistency. The fact that that goal a few weeks ago counts for Man City, the exact thing. The penalty that we don't get at Spurs, the same player does the same thing at Arsenal, and they get a penalty for it. It's not about. This isn't a point about United, although United have suffered after the Wolves one, and the Wolves one was an error as well. I'm not saying that that wasn't a penalty. It was a penalty. I thought it should have been a penalty, and I don't think we should have won the game. Well, maybe Onana would have saved it, and that might have changed his entire season. Well, you never know. Might have changed the way that he started the season. But the point is, we've had that one. VAR errors in every single game. Maybe it wasn't an error as such with the Evans goal, but it was an inconsistency of the law being applied yet again. And if the referees don't know, and I said this a few weeks ago, and people say, "Oh, no, you must vote Donald Trump then," because I'd said something about when Mike Dean came out and said, sorry, my impersonations are not great, but I'm impersonating a tweet there, not an accent, so I don't know what he sounds like. Probably as dumb as that. But which is the meanest thing I've ever said on this podcast. I'm sorry. You're probably not dumb, just associating me with it being a Trump supporter. Anyway, rambling. The point is that Mike Dean came out and he basically said that he made a decision when he was the VAR to make sure that his mate didn't get into any trouble. And we talked about on this podcast how worrying and how concerning that was for the integrity of the game. And we've already seen it. Like I've said this week, we've seen two identical positions for United over the last few weeks that have been replayed in other games, and those decisions have gone the other way. Paul, what's going on, and how do they rectify it? Because the competition is a farce anyway. Because you looked at your watch then.
No, sorry, it's just we watched us buzz. It just buzzed.
No, all right, wrap it up. The point I'm making.
I do. You're right.
Go on.
The thing of my bit though is that who decides who's actually come out. I want to. If it's been an ex-player, we need to know who the ex-player is, who's actually come out and said arms being in these kind of positions. What is the best? What is the positions? So when the one against Tottenham with Fernandes against Romero, I turned around I didn't think it was a penalty because he's diving in. And when you dive in, you got one, you're virtually going down, so you've got one arm going down and the other arm's up there.
Yeah.
Because I think in a way you're kind of thinking about protecting your face, but you don't you can never get, but you're there. So you're going down like that. And then that wasn't given a penalty. And I thought that was right. And exactly the same player, but closer to the goal. The player's closer as well. I turn around and say to myself, that's not handball because his arms are in a natural position. I mean, there's no such thing as diving for the ball with your arms behind your back because you will dislocate something. You might break a wrist when you land. It's impossible. You can't do it. For that point, God, he's going to shoot. I use that word God because anything else I would have sworn it wouldn't have come across well. But it's just, you're going out and you're going to go and you're going there. That's your movement. That's your movement. But it has to, as far as I'm concerned, go back to deliberate handball. That's not deliberate. That is ridiculous. If you can get your arms back there, I would applaud you. I would do. Because all you've done really, yes, your body's of the size it is. That's made your body big doing that, but that's a natural position. And plus it's a safety position for when you hit the floor. So when I look at the Ericsson one, how was that? I don't even get the Ericsson one being given a penalty. Yeah. I like to believe that wouldn't be given here because his arms he was seeing the ball and he's kind of lifting to jump. He wasn't trying to jump like that because we would all abuse Christian Eriksen if he put his arms behind his back and tried to jump.
Exactly.
So it's absolutely madness what's going on. And the fact of that we've got a different rule here to the one overseas is absolute madness. Why? At one point, I was saying, why aren't we changing this one? Oh, it hasn't changed in UEFA. UEFA got to do that. And I think to myself, why then are we got a different rule to UEFA, yet we're playing in a UEFA tournament? Yeah. So it doesn't. So we're not prepared for those kind of rulings. It's absolute madness that is going on. You know, there's the wrong decisions. We're getting more problems. It was easy before VAR to lose a game, and we blame the referee, and we always ends up after maybe the 7th pint and 5th shot that we're trying to say, well, the referee's human, he's going to make mistakes. Now people go on and they're on, and it's made the game worse, by the way. It's made the game quite unenjoyable. Well, it is unenjoyable, to be perfectly honest. They're on about pulling, you know, when you see people moaning, you see the championship referees are shocking. And they're talking about bringing it down now. They can't bring it down there because it'll get even worse if you get those people and you give them the opportunity to sit behind and use a cursor to go back and forth. The whole thing is a debacle, to be perfectly honest. I've got in a habit, by the way, it is 10 o'clock with Wayne and Dave, and at 11:30 I'm watching Ref Watch. If I'm not watching it, I've got it recorded because I want to hear Dermot Gallagher's thing. I'm not bothered about the other people around. I just want to see what Dermot says, and today is going to be very, very interesting. Yeah. What he is going to say, what's going on, and I mean it is ridiculous. Johnny Evans, for me, it was a goal. It was a goal. You look at the reactions of the players, and that says to you it was a goal. But after everything now, every time a goal is or something's not going for you, you're turning around and you're seeing everybody asking the referee, go and have a look at it. Okay. Is someone coming to you that? And the referee's getting involved in the conversation. I say to the referee, don't talk to them. It's got nothing to do with them. You're only meant to be talking to the captain. But every time anything, a decision, it's virtually now that people want to say, oh, is anyone watching it? Have they seen it again? You think so. Football was subjective before, a subjective sport, and now it's just becoming like an open book now at this moment in time. Same as the goal line technology, which was brilliant, certain bits should have been brought in at different times. It's all brought it all into the house all at once, and now you can't kick out certain things anymore. Some of these rulings that you can look at, oh, we can't look at that because that hasn't happened and that hasn't happened. So we've got to wait for a domino effect to get an answer at the end. Yeah. You know, if someone, he's just punched him. Oh no, but that happened before, so I can't do anything about that. But he's broke his nose and they're carrying him off the pitch. Oh, it doesn't matter. Madness.
Yeah, it is.
That was my impersonation of a Wayne Rant.
Well, you know, it's
not as good.
My phone went off. My watch went off there.
I was gonna say I never check my watch, but then again, I'm not waiting to end the call so we can all go and watch Dermot Gallagher. But now I know why you checked, because you're like, oh, Wayne's on one. How long is this one gonna take? I get it. Anyway, nothing much left to rant about, but we will preview the 2 games that we've got coming up against Palace, Carabao Cup, and then the league. A mixed start for Palace, but very much a sort of Crystal Palace start to the season. They win at Sheffield United, lose to Arsenal, draw with Brentford, win against Wolves, lose against Villa, draw home to Fulham.
I was at Palace on Saturday before I'd done the United game.
And what did you make of them?
No width. They missed Zaha and Elise, who's out with a reoccurrence of his hamstring. Oswald, is it Oswald? Oswald, isn't it? The centre forward. Have I got that wrong? The 2 centre halves were easy. Diop, it was easy. Never. They took him off. Mateta is a massive problem. His body shape, awkwardness, the fact he doesn't know what he's going to do next, caused more problems in 15 minutes than Oswald did for the previous hour and 15 minutes. Defensively, Gahey, good centre half, really, really good centre half. Anderson, very physical, good pairing. Fullbacks, I would really like to believe if Marcus Rashford is playing, and he should be playing, that he's going to run Joe Ward ragged all day long, because Joe Ward is just a fullback from era before, honest, solid, coming up to 400 games for Crystal Palace, should outrun him all day long. Midfield, they rely on Eze, over-relying him because they've got nothing else creativity-wise. Ayew is busy, causes problems in tight areas. Manchester United should still win that game against Crystal Palace, but United have problems with Crystal Palace at Old Trafford.
Yeah, nicely summed. Dave, do you have anything? Well, you haven't been to watch Palace, unfortunately, so you can't give anywhere near as expert opinion as that. But I mean, the 2 games that we've got coming up, like Paul said, the problems that they've got in terms of the creativity should make it an easier afternoon for our defence, at least. We don't know what the issues are with Reguilon and so on, but it makes it an interesting week in terms of what do they do with the Carabao Cup, because we know with Ten Hag that he doesn't take these things lightly, but this is the defence of the competition that he won. We can't sniff it. This may be the only avenue that we've got of winning a trophy this season, so he's not going to want to take that lightly, but he's going to have to rotate this squad at this moment in time. How does he make changes to keep that fresh, considering we're so thin on the ground with players?
Before I talk about that, Paul, when you're watching Ref Watch later on, have you seen the penalty that Luton got against Wolves?
Yeah. So I forgot. Do you know what? I forgot that one. Yeah, I watched that twice last night. I watched that twice because I heard about it and I saw Gary O'Neill's bit, and I saw it. I mean, that was embarrassing. That was absolutely embarrassing.
Sorry, Dave. That
was a referee. That was only his second game, and you could see in his face the way he refereed that game. And I just saw the highlights, and you could just see he had nothing. He had no personality. He was just like, "I'm here. What do I do next?"
If ever we can use an example of why that rule is absolutely ridiculous, that's what we should be pitching it on, and that's what we should be bringing to the FA and go, if you're calling this a penalty just because it hit his hand, well, then that rule makes no sense. So, yeah, I'll be interested to hear what he says about that one, because that was a farce. Crystal Palace, I think after the presser on the game the other night, he did hint that Garnacho would more than likely start against Crystal Palace on Tuesday. So if I don't watch a lot of Palace, so if their full backs are as I won't use the word weak, but if they can be got at, I think Garnacho is the man to get at them. So I'd love to see Garnacho come in. I'd definitely love to see Hoyland start still. I want to see him in there. And on Amrabat is another one that we should bring in, which I believe he will. And I would stick with Johnny Evans. I really would. What's the point in risking Varane? And unless we have to, I'd rather keep Varane for the league game because the 3 points is more important than a cup run at this moment in time. Even though we are the current holders, I still think we're going to have enough in the tank to beat Palace. But the big game is obviously next weekend against Palace in the league. But I do think he will make a lot of changes, and I definitely would like to see Hannibal retain his place. I think he will. But then again, he may be looking at him for the Palace game at the weekend and, not risking him at all because that's, it's a lot in 7 days for a player just breaking into the team. But I definitely want to see Garnacho. I want to see Garnacho and Hoyland again. I think their cameo role there a few weeks back was pretty good. They seem to be on the same wavelength. And I really want to see that. I definitely want to see Hoyland starting. I don't want to see Martial on that pitch. I know we've criticised Marcus Rashford for his lack of running back, but Martial just brings the whole team down. I think the players know it. I think the players, Paul has mentioned this before, about players in the dressing room. They can just sniff out a player that just doesn't want to be there. And Martial just doesn't want to be at Manchester United. It's very, very, very obvious. I think Eriksen will come back in as well. He may drop Casemiro as well, to keep him fresh for the weekend. But there's absolutely no reason, even with those changes, that we can't. But I want to see Garnacho. I want to see him playing against Palace. I want to see him go with those defenders. I think it'll be a good cup game. And I'm looking forward to it. But obviously the big one is the weekend. It really is. I want to see all 3 points. And like I said, this is a period of 3 games in a row where we should be picking up maximum points. But yeah, looking forward to 2 games against Palace. I agree with Paul. I think once they sold Zaha, it took a massive, avenue out of that team. And they don't have much width. We don't have much width either. So the centre of the park is going to be where everything happens. So, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And Reguilon, I really hope he's fit for the weekend. Paul, I got a question for you. Based on his form now as a full back, would you? Is it too early to make this call? Would you put a bid in and buy this guy? Because we tried to buy him in the past, and I think me personally, I think it could be argued he's been our best player since he's come in. He really has. He's been so consistent, and he wants to play. Ten Hag said at the weekend that he was sick and ill and he didn't cry off. He said, "No, I want to play. I want to play." I just hope that hamstring injury isn't as bad as it looked when he was limping off. So, would you buy him at this point?
You don't want to jump in too quick, but when you see that much enthusiasm and zest when he goes forward, there's a bounce in his game. The end product hasn't been there, but not everyone's blessed with that all the time, are they? But you can see there's enthusiasm. He gets up and back. He wants to get up and back, which is a added bonus. You look at it, Malassi. Hearing about Malassi, don't know how long he's out for. But he's a different kind of left back to Malacia. He's definitely plays with more energy. I would take a punt on him if the money was right. But then if you're Tottenham, are you going to sell that easy? Even a player you don't want, are you going to sell him that easy to Manchester United? The answer to that is no. I very much doubt it because we are talking about Daniel Levy. But yes, I certainly would on that point, just by the fact of he's on loan and things aren't going well, but yet he's playing like someone who really wants to be there. Yeah.
I think that's the big plus for me is that, he gets up and down. He's not afraid of a tackle. And he, I know he was arguing with the ref at the weekend for that tackle on Casemiro, I think it was. And that to me just showed that, he wants to be there. He wants to be, he wants to be in that team. He's playing to be in that team. And I think when Luke Shaw comes back, he's got a bit of a fight on his hand to get back into that left back position.
Yeah, but that's
but we are looking at Martinez at the moment. He's missing more games. I mean, I thought the man was made of concrete, but at the moment he missed a game at the weekend. And if Luke Shaw was to come back, you'd maybe look at Luke Shaw on the left-hand side of that defence. Then you've got Johnny Evans. You can put him on the left-hand side to make long raking passes for you as well. So at the moment, there's an abundance on that left-hand side, really. Not many teams can say that. The rest of it, that's another story. But we just talk about the left at the moment.
Wayne, before we move on, though, I'm sorry, I got one more question for Paul. We've been riddled with injuries this past season, and last season we didn't have the best of luck. We seem to have a lot of muscular injuries. Is this just bad luck? In your experience, as a professional footballer for well over a decade, could it be a medical team? Could it be? I mean, are we just talking bad luck here?
I think you are talking bad luck, and then you're talking as well the mental strength of the players as well. Okay. That's how you got to look at it as well. You can have all these physios, but they can only go with what they know, and then they get to a point where I really don't know what you're feeling. That's the one thing they can't feel what that player's feeling. So they got to hope in a way that certainly this player's being honest, and just hope that his thresholds, what he feels isn't going to affect him. But if the player's one of them in his head and he feels something and he says, I'm not fit enough to play, then they've got to go with that. And then they've got to tell the manager. The manager in today's football can't fight against anything, can't really get involved. All he can do is ask his physio, and then he's got to look at the player. And it is every player is an individual. And that's how you have to virtually treat them as an individual nowadays, where before it was collective and you just put people out there, but you can't do that anymore because you get what you read in the papers now. Everyone starts now, the little stories coming out when in fact really they're not just people taking punts that there might be something rather than there is. And that's what's happening with Manchester United at the moment. That's always going to happen when you get the club like United, of course, but you get players who are not having a good time. They might have had a problem. They're going to speak to people because that's what you do. It's human nature. Because you're not happy, then someone's going to turn around and then tell a friend of a friend he's not happy because they're using that because I know this player and he's at Manchester United, so it's a big story for them. I mean, it's all like Chinese whispers in a way, and it gets to somebody, they write it down, put it out there, and that's it. And that's why you end up, and it comes a big drama, and it turns into an incredible story, almost like a film, because it's Manchester United.
Yeah. Well, we'll be back to discuss the next installment in that film series next week. I know Dave is a big fan of my stats. Paul is too, really, so he is a little anomaly for you.
Can't wait.
Well, we played Arsenal. Then we played... Who did we play after Arsenal? Brighton. So Brighton, Bayern, Burnley, Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace is alphabetically going on. Copenhagen, and then Brentford are going to ruin it by going back to B. But we'll be back to talk about Copenhagen and Brentford ruining that sequence. What, Dave? What?
I thought you were going to say, the first letters of all those is my crush at school. I don't know. I don't know what to expect when you come up with these stats.
I was going down the alphabet. It was not really a stat. It was a trend. It was a trend.
I can't wait to play Zimbabwe.
Yeah. Well, not quite as good as Dave's. No. It was 72.1% possession. Anyway, we'll be back next week. If you've enjoyed watching, give us a like and subscribe. If you've enjoyed listening back on the audio podcast, if you can subscribe and leave a review on the platform you're listening on. We'll be back to address that alphabetical trend next week with previews of the Copenhagen and Brentford games. Until then, stay safe, stay well, and let's get Paul off to watch Dermot.